Hey, welcome back to episode 4 of Sanity for Sound podcast. We're here at Switzerville Sound Retreat, and today's episode is called Where Creativity Comes From, and we'll be covering some other stuff as well. And I'm here with a longtime friend and collaborator, Landon Chatterton. You're a drummer, promoter, singer-songwriter. You've dabbled in photography. You're also now a working barber. And you spend a lot of time doing homestead farming, and you've also spent a great deal of time in the yoga and meditation sphere. So thanks for coming and doing the chat.
Yeah, as Willie Nelson said, it's a long story.
Yeah.
And no, it's nice to be here with you back in the spaceship here. And it's always a pleasure. We've collaborated quite a bit in the last number of years here, and I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Well, same. And yeah, we've done a couple of your more recent records here, which have been with the Beta 58s.
Yep.
And the your newest project, the Screamin' Sins.
Yep.
And I always love working with you. It's funny, you kind of have sort of become this sort of interband producer for some of these bands. Like, you join and you sort of get everything tightened up and ready to go before you even go into a studio. And it seems like, kind of see, with betas anyways, you sort of got it on its legs, you made a record, and then it's almost like you moved on to the next one that needed that role more than anything. I know there was a little bit more behind your departure there, but seems like, would that be fair to say that's a little bit of something you enjoy doing, is bringing something up to a certain level?
Yeah, I like this concept, and I never actually thought about it until you mentioned it. This what did you call it?
Kind of an interband producer role.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting concept. I guess it's what I naturally do, and the way I go about it, I guess, is I try to trust my own instincts. And, for instance, there was a time when I was a chef, right? And I had to teach people how to cook. And I would constantly be trying to get them to trust their own instincts. So, taste the food, what needs to be adjusted. But I found people were afraid to really just trust their own instincts, their own palate, that sort of thing. So that as kind of analogy, musically, I trust within myself. Like, I have to like the music and enjoy it. And if there's things that I intuitively feel that need some, pre-production, tightening things up or whatever, that's kind of how I approach it. And but yeah, preparation is key in any situation for recording. I always try to be kind of over prepared for recording sessions, so I'm already thinking, what's the BPMs, on this song, how's this transition going to be. When you do enough recording, you kind of get a sense of how things are going to flow and what challenges you might be met with. So if you can preemptively think about those and think them through. I spend a lot of time before recording kind of just thinking about the songs and the process, just to try to make it easier for you. And it's beneficial for us too. And it's more, productive. And of course, you're not spending endless hours and money in the studio. So.
Well, and it speaks to like a concept I talk a lot about with bands. What you feed the input dictates the output. And especially, I'm somebody who can do a lot in post-production after. Mm-hmm. But and so musicians and artists can lean on that. But the more they come worked and honed and refined, the more, you're right, in one respect it's quicker and nicer for me, for sure, when you're not having to do a complete salvage thing. But it's like so many things in art and creativity, it's that input is the most important thing, and it will, no matter what you do after it, it's that initial input feed. And it's almost like the first time you hear something, when you get that gut, like, I like this or I don't, or I felt this was off. And then we kind of, even for me, I have to be careful not to sit and try and convince myself that something is fine. Like, that first time putting ears on something or eyes or whatever it is, I really have to be honest about how I felt. And so I try to get that across to artists in a sense of, hey, you know, bring it in honed, bring it in prepared. It's only going to make your end product better. Like yeah. So, and I'll say one more thing, you being the drummer, that's probably for a band, that's probably one of the most important things to be tight. You could kind of be a looser guitarist and bassist, but the singer and the drummer are definitely, and it's funny, that's what you hear in like a grocery store. I always call it the grocery store mix. You kind of hear the drums and the vocals. The guitars and the bass kind of fall away. So it's not that they aren't important, but you know, the drummer is definitely like, you're what everybody's sitting on.
Foundational. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You hit on a couple of good points there. Made me think of photography in a sense where you're trying to capture the optimum, composition before it ever gets to post-production. So straight out of camera, you want to get it as close to the finished product as you possibly can. And then when you take it to post, it just amplifies it that much more. You don't want to sacrifice the vision and just say, well, we'll fix it later. We'll do it in post, that sort of thing. I think it's important to get your art as close to the optimal version of it right out of the gate, and then minimal post-production. You don't want to depend on the post-production. Yeah, as far as drums goes, to me, it's the foundational element. Everything sits on the rhythmic pattern, and it gets built like a pyramid. And there's no layer of that pyramid that's more important than each, but it's in a certain geometry that creates strength. So to me, yeah, drumming is the foundation. It's the first thing you do in a recording, and everything gets built on top of that. So
it's the drive line of the vehicle of the music.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the tires and the transmission, then it's not moving very well.
Yeah, it's the structural integrity of music. And I'm actually grateful that I started playing drums first because of that foundational element. I went on to play the bass and the guitar and more melodic instruments, and then eventually sing. That was the last thing I ever tried to pursue. But I'm glad that I started on the bottom rung, the bottom of the foundation, and got rhythm right. And then from there, I started into a bit of bass. I played stand-up bass a little bit. But again, it's that second layer of the pyramid, the drums, and then the bass, the rhythm section, and all the melody sits on top of that. So, yeah, I think it's been an interesting progression for me, musically.
I know I was like, so to provide some historical context, like our first band was this punk band called The Dying Race. And one of those things in at least my life that I felt were just, it came to me in a way, like it was not forced. I remember I can't remember who you were playing with before, but was it Slaves of Spanky? Was that what you were doing before that band? Like I was trying to think what you were doing before.
Well, I mean, everybody had these high school bands, and they would kind of come and go, and people would jam with whatever. So I actually think of A Dying Race, which, obviously we're kind of jumping ahead here, but the foundation of our relationship is the band that we first played in, A Dying Race. I consider that to be my first band.
I do too.
Not to say that there wasn't, experimental projects and high school stuff.
We were messing around, but I remember getting a call. Somebody, I don't know if it was a friend of ours, Nate, actually prompting you to call me or something, or somebody told me to call you, but somebody came that I would never have expected, just said, because we were looking for a drummer, and for some reason I wasn't considering you. I think at the time we weren't we didn't hang out a lot or anything, but somebody on one of our sides of the camp said, made that connection for us. And it was almost like one of those things that was meant to crash together. And I do remember the first jam just being what the fuck? It was kind of a wave. It just took off, and it's like the surfboard was right there, and all you had to do was stand up,
Yeah, I think like when I say first real band, I guess that I personally mean the first band that wrote original music, that recorded, that put out records independently, that had a van, that toured out of town, out of province. To me, that's what encompasses and makes that a real band, as distinct from some
100%.
high school band. Not that those don't have value too, but and then I guess for me, my memory of the timeline and how it kind of came together, I think we were all coming out of high school, so it was real life now, It's like, what are we going to do? And I had made a decision very early on that, I was going to pursue music, hell or high water. And when I was looking around for other people that seemed like they wanted to really pursue it, you guys were right there. It seemed like you were, really defining yourselves in, adult life. And you guys were the one that really wanted to do it, that had that driver say, we're going to get a van, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And you had that insane kind of drive forward. And that's what kind of drew me to you guys. And because it wasn't necessarily a musical thing, because as you remember, I was way more of a metal guy.
100%, dude.
I was kind of a diehard metal guy. I listened to nothing but Slayer and, Pantera, Cannibal Corpse or whatever. But I thought to myself, well, it's not exactly the music that I necessarily am inspired by at that time, but it was still a music that had similar qualities. I could still play fast. It was still aggressive. It was still technical. It had all these elements and aspects to it that I aligned with. So even though it was a slightly different, musical jumping off point, it merged perfectly, and the energy that I brought to it gave it a real, there's a lot of energy there, man.
Yeah, and it was this natural, again, I bring up that natural wave of energy that to me was just unexplainable, and it was funny the things that happened once I connected. And to wind back just a bit too, it was funny how you said, you were dead set hell or high water. That was kind of the conversation I had with my ex-girlfriend, was like, I'm doing this. If you don't, if you're not with it, I'm kind of, this is it. And
probably why it's your ex-girlfriend.
Well, yeah, actually. And she did, to her fairness, she did put up with that for a very long time. But no, so it's funny how those qualities existing in different places just, again, find themselves. You're right. It was kind of real life now. It's kind of like, yeah, there's no more going to, our kind of usual band hangouts, which for us was like kind of these island jam spaces in different places. It was kind of like, hey, everybody's working now and it's time to do something with your life, essentially. But yeah, so no, that's interesting you bring that up. And I found at first that didn't bother me. I think later on I felt that became more of a wedge point towards the end. The difference in, because I felt that metal side of you clawing to get out by the time we had finished In a Dying Race. It was that energy was like, it couldn't really hold it anymore. And I remember you did go on to start more of a metal band, I think, after that. I believe Excarnation, I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, ADR was such a force of energy. It was amazing. And when I was in that, I was all cards in. I think we all were.
100%.
I mean, I thought that was going to just be it, that was.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately it came to an end, at least my contribution to it. And, but it led me in a lot of different directions. So the band I played in directly after that was the Politics.
That's right. Sorry. Yeah, that's my bad.
It was a kind of cross. It was crust punk. It was grindcore. It was a little bit punk, a little bit metal. So it was kind of a nice mix there. And I love that band too. So
well, and something else I forgot to chain on to was with A Dying Race. These things happen that they were like these breadcrumbs. So like we had done a couple local shows and they went well, And I was just like walking down the street one day, and then the two local promoters that still promote today, like Mark Garnis and one of the guys that was in his band, I Hate Sally, they just like yanked their car like almost like off the road. And they're like, hey, we had to cancel these or we almost have to cancel these 2 out of town shows. Do you guys want to go? And I'm like, fuck, I've never played anywhere. I'm like, what do I got? I've got the truck. I can get the cap put back on it. We didn't even have the van yet, if you remember. We stuck you in the back. I was
in the back.
Dude, you were in the back of an S15 Classic. Like, straight up, man, hats off. Like, I feel bad about that now from a safety perspective. Like, anyways. So, and that's the shit. I love that that's the shit we kind of like lived through for that. But that was one of those things. It was like that first show, I don't know if you remember it, it absolutely went off. It was like a bomb went off.
Yeah.
The first one. The second one, there was like nobody there in Toronto, but the first one was like a circle pit. We sold a ton of records, and you got like a taste of it. And I think it went from that to like kind of winning a couple competitions. Like, it kept leading us there, in this natural way, which is interesting, because not everything that we set out to do kind of has that effect.
Yeah, I just remember being a huge burst of creativity. I remember like you and I sitting in that old green truck, like we couldn't wait to get into the studio and write another song. We were so focused and motivated. I think it was a really great time. It was a really creative time. It was a real burst of energy, and I'll always think fondly of it, for sure.
Same here, man. Same here.
Chapter.
Yeah.
And I find still when we're working together, when we get going on something, like we're spot on, both the energy, the focus, it's the same. So we've always worked well together, whether, we're recording an album in 2024 or playing punk music in 2002,
So true, man. It was again, I look back at that time just as fondly, although it's taken me a long time. That section of the band, and then the sort of section where you weren't in it, it got more and more like toxic for me in my own thinking, like in the way I wanted more and more of like some of the dribbles of success that it was like bringing, the smaller successes. It was, and when things weren't lining up, like it was becoming hard for me, and I kept chasing. I think a lot of it became more about chasing this feeling I was getting of validation, like through, because it was probably the first thing in my life that, I did well at, I excelled at. And there were signs from the external world that I was good at it. I was always like half-assed at sports and stuff. So, but now I really look back on it very, like, I'm incredibly grateful what I got to do. I'm not dead. I didn't roll over in a van and die.
A couple close calls.
Close calls for sure. So one thing, so there's a little historical context, and I'm super glad we touched on it, because again, it's the complete foundation of why we're sitting here. And also I'm just amazed at, like, as the same as certain aspects are, as you pointed out, that we can get together in 2024 and make an album. So much has happened with us from a growth standpoint, from the experiences that we went off to do. But we did want to talk kind of just about creativity and where that comes from. You brought that up. We were sitting in the barber studio, and I was pulling your arm to come on the podcast here, and you said, yeah, I'd like to talk about where creativity comes from. And I was prompted to be like, I wonder where that's coming from you. What do you want to touch on with that? What perplexes you about that concept, and what things do you feel like you have a good solid knowledge of about where our creative drive comes from?
Well, I think it's an endlessly fascinating question, and it's something that I've thought about. And, we're trying to look at this history, and there's so much to it, punk bands, metal bands, I mean, you name it, like genre-wise and instrument-wise, it's all just this sort of spectrum of experiences. But the theme of it is just creativeness, like to being a creative individual. So what does it mean? What is creativity? Where does it come from? How do we harness it? What do we do with it? I think these are foundational. It doesn't really matter what you're expressing, but what is it? Where does it come from? How do we utilize it? So I find these questions fascinating, and it's a nice theme to kind of override all the details. But, okay, what is creativity? Okay, it's an act of creation. It's a creative act. You're bringing something into being that was not there before. Pretty simple definition, right? I remember a TED Talk from years ago, and the speaker put a little caveat on this. He was trying to define creativity, and what he put on the end was, I think he said, it's an original idea that has value. So his caveat was the value piece, because really we're creative beings. We create all the time. Could be creating harmony or disharmony, but we're always creating. So the piece of value is that little caveat that brings a little bit of focus to it. So my working definition of creativity is to manifest something into reality that was not there before, that has value. And we could discuss the value piece, because that's kind of an interesting subject too. What creates value? Is it valuable to me? Is it valuable to you? All that sort of stuff. Those are great questions.
And I would think that would be kind of weighing in on like the commerce side of it versus experience.
Exactly. And so, yeah, and that's the tricky part about being a creative individual, is you have to, it's a sort of a channeling. So where does it come from? That's the next question, right? And for me, it's not of this realm, you could say, meaning that I don't walk down the street and find creativity and put it in my pocket, save it for later. It's not of this place. It's from, you can explain it in different ways. You could, to me, it comes from a psycho-spiritual type of a realm. You could think about that in many ways. You could think about it in terms of, psychology, emotion, intuition, these types of places. You could also think of it as a, etheric, non-physical, spiritual realm. I'm good with both of those. I think it's all part of it. But the bottom line is it's not from here. It comes from a internal place, and we don't produce it. We channel it. We accept it. We're a receiver of creativity. Our goal as creative individuals is to recognize that spark of creativity and then bring it into this realm. So it comes from intuition. It could be a flash of a vision. It could be a whisper in the trees. It could be some very minute, hard to put your finger on, that could be the spark of a creative project. So you always have to be on the open and receiving end of that and actually recognize those as little seeds of creativity. Now, what then do we do with these little seeds? That's up to us, right? But the spark is a kind of a gift, and then it's up to us to actually use the other side. So on one side of us is very much an intuitive being level thing. That's where the creativity comes from. But on the other side of our personality, our intellect, our technical knowledge. These are the things of this realm, right? So it's taking something from one realm and bringing it into another. So we need to harness this spark, but then actually bring it into production here. And this is your laboratory. This is one here. Instrument. So this is the tools in which that we utilize to try to bring something in. And I think this ties into the value piece, because that's really what we're doing. It's not why we do it. Like, I create because I'm compelled to create art. That's why I do it. I'm not thinking of it in terms of commerce, or if it ends up that way and I can make a living.
Where's this landing
great.
from a product standpoint? Now, you make me think of one concept. How much of what exists in that other realm, how much of that are we reminded by what somebody else has brought in? So it's like when we're younger and we're hearing out certain albums, and you go, like for you, it's like Slayer. You hear it, and out of all the music, you could have been like zeroed in on whatever frequency, all these different stations. You go, that's hitting my. So is that our basically just talking about influences from existing art that sort of says to the creative spiritual entity, hey, that thing, I want to make some of that. I want to make something like that. Like, how, what's your thoughts on us being influenced by what's already here?
Yeah, I think we live in this world and we take in aspects from everywhere, right? And this is what creates a part of our personality. But yeah, a spark of creativity, you could come in and then you could sort of choose how to express that in the world. That's our job, is to take that little seed, and then based on our own uniqueness in this realm, we can choose how to mold it. So it's like it's a collaboration. So we're taking that little seed, and then we're creating the uniqueness that we see fit. And a lot of that is it's a combination of our intuition and then our technical skills and influences in this lifetime. So yeah, and it's a constant sort of evolution. Like music builds upon itself, and all creativity kind of builds upon itself. You see what's possible and what you resonate with, and typically what you resonate with is like it's resonating with your emotional state. So for me, as a young man, I had a lot of anger, frustration, a lot of negativity that I was working through, and that's perfectly, fairly normal, I think, for a young man to work through these sorts of things. But for me, that sort of internal resonance, that's why I related to metal music. It's why I related to the energy and the spirit of punk rock, because what it resonated with was my internal emotional
It was like an outlet you could plug into, and move that energy in a healthy way.
It's a productive way to move energy. So we're constantly taking in from our surroundings, and the creative people are channeling it through their being and expressing it through. So it's a cyclical pattern. And we don't know how we, as artists, musicians, creatives, we also don't know how we're influencing anybody around us too, or the next generation or whatever. But it's a reciprocity. It's a circular pattern. It's taking in, it's processing, and then it's expressing.
Was there ever a time for you where, and I know this to be true, like a lot of people would say, comment on how good a drummer you were, and I saw many times that happen. So how did that feel for you? Was getting that love, those compliments, did that ever become a thing? Like, were you always able to easily manage that? Did you not give a fuck, or did it become something you sort of chased for a while, or at least you know what I'm saying? Because I think a lot of once you start getting some attention, and in especially creative arts, I guess in anything really, but something happens, and I think you start chasing some kind of reaction in your brain. Like, there's something that feels good. Hey, there's a validation. There's a chemical thing that happens there, and that makes us feel valued. And then obviously even with social media, like we can create more of that for ourselves by posting more things. Now, I do think it's having an adverse effect, because when we don't get it, we're kind of craving it more. There's more of a craving on the backside of that. But I'm interested to know how you dealt with that, because you were someone who was really good. And took those compliments. So I'm interested to know how you processed that back then, and how you would process it today differently.
Well, it's a great question. I think everybody has their strengths, what they're naturally drawn to for whatever reason. You know, I was, I don't know, in grade 6 or 7, and before I ever even had a drum set, you know, I always knew that, like, I would literally carry a pair of drumsticks around before I even knew how to play the drums. It was always something that I was
That's insane.
pulled to and drawn to. And my girlfriend always has this phrase that she says that always sticks with me. It's an old chestnut, you know. How you do one thing is how you do everything. It's a phrase that I constantly go back to, and I think it's a good one.
I love
and
that
it's
one.
basically just saying, like, the energy, the intuition, the intention, that you put into one thing is translates to everything that you do. So whatever qualities that were within me and yet to be expressed, you know. So, but yeah, I think I'm just like, I think a lot what I am doing. I try to be very precise in what I'm doing. There's certain qualities, I guess, that lended well to that, like, foundational rhythmic element that, you know,
Yeah.
sort of thing, if you get what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
I don't know exactly why I progressed very quickly on the drums. It was certainly a channeling of energy and things like that I like to have that expression.
Yeah.
But I did progress fairly quickly at it. And I don't know, as far as praise, I mean, you know, I think every musician has this experience where you're going to play a live performance, right? And there's this anxiety, trepidation, this excitement leading into it. And it's like this wave, this big curve, right? And you hit this high, right? And it's kind of like a drug. It kicks off all the endorphins or the chemicals with, you know, whatever. It feels really good. Like, I feel at my best just after I've done a good live performance.
Yeah.
I think every musician can relate to that. It's a really good feeling. And of course, who doesn't like to feel like they're expressing something of value and having that sort of feedback loop? It feels great. And but as artists, I think we have to start to define our intentions. Like, is that the reason that you're creating art? Just for that high or that feedback? And I think that is veering off on the wrong
Yeah, and
track.
I don't think it starts there. I think when you start getting the praise, then it changes, because it often starts from the most pure place, and no one's giving you praise usually when you start out, because you suck, and
that's why the art that comes out at that time is usually good, because you're not thinking about that feedback loop, because it's a pure expression of music, of art, and that's what you need to value the most in all of this, right? You don't do it you do it because you're compelled to do it, to create art. And if you get feedback from it that's positive, that's excellent. That's great. No problem. But it's not your starting point. It's not why you create art. And if you move into that and you're strictly creating things for that feedback, then that is that's basically like pop music. It's a assembly line production. It's a manufacturing, but it's not art. It's a manufacturing.
Yeah. Now I would.
And I think a good musician just has the ears to hear that. What's a pure thing, and
that's how they churn it out. Now, where credit's due. It's usually the people behind the pop star that are the workhorses. There's people sitting at a table writing line after line.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And people can make a life and a living
100%
doing this sort of thing. Absolutely. 100%. I'm not knocking it at all.
Yeah.
But there's a divide there.
It's for commerce. You're right. It's to get on the billboard. It's to like everyone's shooting for number one. So I completely agree with that.
So then, you just have to have a clear intention about what you're actually doing, because there's many aspects to music and music industry.
Now, I think people lose sight in that. Again, I'll bring up social media again, because if you can't limit your use of it properly and in a healthy way, you're going to be subject to everybody's successes at a 24/7. Just it's a scroll away. You're going to see the next, like, there's always somebody's success, congratulatory sort of barrage of posts. They're there for you every time you go there. And I think what ends up happening is it's affecting and I've had this conversation with a lot of artists. It's making artists want to do things for that reason, because these platforms and this ecosystem that now exists, it makes us want to compete. It's like keeping up with the Joneses in the digital realm. It's like, I need to have my next badge. Everything's happening so quickly. So now I think a lot of people are actually, they don't set out that way. They might have gotten some great compliments, some great validation, but now it's to the point of, I need to try to keep up with this fast-paced barrage of information and, plaques and trophies and wins from, and it's endless. It's endless on those apps. So that's kind of something I'm seeing, and I think a lot of people right now are trying to manage that. And I've fallen into that even recently. I have bottom outs because I get myself in these entanglements of to the point where I've tried to build a construct of myself, and it needs, and then I become so low, and I'm like, it's because that needs to fall away, because I can't keep propping this construct up for the world anymore. And then it falls away, and then I'm just grateful for what I have. But it's like a really dirty, painful process. It's almost like I'm being split in two physically. That's how it feels. I went through this kind of recently, actually, and I go through one every once in a while. It's when I do a lot of cool projects and stuff that I'm very grateful for, but I want it to keep going. I want it never to stop, and it stops. And there's always somebody better than me, and I just break down. And I know a lot of it is my personal usage on those apps that I'm really trying to get away from.
I think probably the best advice that I ever heard on this topic, discussing social media and all this sort of stuff. We're bombarded with all this technology, and it's hard to manage. Somebody used the analogy of a medicine cabinet. Like, every time you open that phone, think about it as opening that medicine cabinet, and there's an appropriate dosage, right? So take what you need from it. It might be good medicine, but know when to kind of limit that and close that door again. But I think that's just a part of modern life. Modern adult life is learning how to navigate the technology and all the implications of it. And I think everybody probably struggles with that. For me personally, in my relationship, we have little things that we do. We try to limit the phone, early in the morning and late at night, kind of thing. And so you have to learn to manage it. We don't have phones at the dinner table. We don't have phones in the bedroom. So we create these, a little bit of a structure to kind of help with that.
And you're digging your hands in the dirt a lot lately, just with, you guys do a lot of farming. around your property. So I'm sure that keeps your hands off the phone because you're digging in the earth a lot. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's just about balance. So to be a clear, open, receptive channel to this theme that we're talking about, this creativity, to be able to harness it, you need to be in a good balanced state, especially as you age. When you're young, you're very open to receiving that, but the challenge is to, as you're aging, to continue to stay open to that receptiveness. And to me, it helps just to be in a good, balanced mindset. So for me, like, you have to take care of your physical body, you have to take care of your mind, right? These are just basic maintenance things of this life. But if you're, strong, clear, you'll be much more prepared when that creativity comes to actually, to be able to channel and harness it. And, the reason, we're doing all this homesteading, we're raising chickens and raising our own food and eggs and all this sort of stuff. It's really just to try to stay healthy, to just be in balance in this earth, in this highly technological, this is a prime example of it.
Processed world of food. Like, when you think about, not to completely take this in a different way, but it's crazy to think, like, there's an epiphany of walking into a grocery store and going, hey, probably 85% of this or more is made in a factory, made to sit on a shelf. It wasn't how our ancestors used to eat. So, and it's something we just take for granted because it's this convenience thing that really came probably, especially after probably the world wars and stuff. It was like, hey, I can get anything I want. Now it's like at your door, like Amazon, literally, like you click something on your phone and it's at your doorstep. So, I'm always very, when I go to your barbershop and I see what you've done, it definitely, I don't feel like I have the capacity to do what you're doing, but there's a part of me that's like, oh man, I see where I could see what you would be getting from that, both on a nutritional level, but on a level of, hey, I grew this and I made this and I was able to control some of the things that went into it.
It was a big part of my journey, my personal journey, but also my creative journey. When I was young, that was it. I was going to be a rock star. That was the end of it. That was my only goal, my only intention. I put all my cards into it and I took it as far as that I could go. But at a certain point, it all came crumbling down, and then I had to decide what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this life? What am I going to do with, how am I going to make a living? Let's just pretend for a second I'm not going to be a rock star. Then what? What do I actually do? And that's really where it was like, either I'm going to end up in the 27 club or I'm going to, sort of take a new path. And it was at that point where I took a really personal approach to my own education. I'm talking sort of outside of music a little bit now.
That's fine.
And I studied, health, nutrition, food, farming. I was working on organic farms, and I took a real different path at that time, and it led me into some very interesting places. It put me very much onto a spiritual path. Inevitably, that's where it led to. But really, all that is just to get back to a place of balance and a place of creativity, and then actually to come back kind of full circle and come back to the music in a way, and hopefully just from a more kind of pure, open place. And like I'm to the point now, like I create music and I create art because that's who I am. It's in the fiber of my being, and that's what I need to express in this lifetime. And my job is just to do it the best that I can do it. So if I'm going to record a record, whether it's a country music record, whether it's a psychobilly or a punk rock record, to me it's all just kind of different expressions. It's all me. It's not inauthentic that I jump from genre to genre, because those are all my interests. We are multi-dimensional beings. We can have a lot of expressions, and they can all be pure to us and authentic. Our job as creators is to do it the best that we can possibly do it. Put your full intention into it, and that's what creates purity. That's and that's what other people can sense that and pick up on that purity. So our job is to express, to bring things into the world, create music, create art, create anything that you want, but do it with your highest purpose and highest intention.
Yeah, and I mean, from my perspective, it's a little different in the sense of, like, when I decided I was gonna use all this stuff to create income because I wanted to get up and do it every day. But then you start seeing the cost in it. So it's a beautiful thing to walk out every morning. I have my coffee and I'm like, this is where I get to come now every day, rather than, somewhere I don't want to be. The flip side of that is I think I've traded in some of my own like energy for my own art, and that's a balance I need to try to get back. Like, because this was so much of this was like, okay, yeah, I'll help other bands make their stuff, and then, I'll have the time and to create my own records. And then it was funny, by the time I got to a place where, this was generating some income and stuff, it was like the bands were long gone. But I love, I understand a band very well. Like from a perspective of, I know what would make them comfortable when they came through the door. I've been in clinical situations where I'm like, how does this person that's kind of running this session not see what's happening with this person needs, more of a personal touch. There was a complete lack of emotional intelligence in certain rooms and situations that I was in. And that's exactly what I didn't want to happen. I wanted to be somebody that, hey, if there was a little bit of energy in the room, we got to get that out of there before anything else is going to get made. Sometimes somebody's nervous, or you can tell maybe they just came from having a fight with their spouse, and they bring that energy into the room, and they're not telling you, they're not saying anything. They're just, you can feel it. Somebody's insecurities, whatever that is. But, so that became, as good to help other people through,
well, it's people, the creative people, they need, because I don't understand all this shit you have in here. Oh, yeah. Right? I need you as a technically, proficient individual. 100%. It goes both ways. So the thing about true creativity, it's like you get these little sparks, but they're kind of messy at times, right? Yeah. So I've always thought about this actually as being a drummer, because historically drummers don't always get kind of songwriting credits, right? Usually it's who wrote the lyrics and who wrote the melody. 100%. Those are typically where the songwriting credits go. And drummers are always like, well, what the fuck, But to me, even in the songwriting process, I think of myself as a technician at times too. So I can take and harness somebody else's creative idea and actually bring structure to it. And I actually feel like that's my gift. Like I don't write lyrics. I don't typically write melody, but I have a good understanding of music and song structures and how things fit together, hooks 100%. And all this sort of stuff. And that's what I actually bring to it.
And that's that interband production role that I brought up earlier. It's like that, and it's funny, the natural things you just notice that, it's like, it's crazy how easy it is for me to bring someone else's art into the world than my own. My own is like squeezing out like a cow from between my legs or something. It's like, I want this to come out so bad. And I almost think I might have to, hire someone like me to help me do mine, because it's so hard to sit. And that was kind of the whole, again, just getting back quickly to this. It's like, oh, it's going to be great. I'll be able to make tons and tons of music, but it's actually turned out to be the opposite, which is kind of, again, just kind of an ironic thing, but something now we're learning to restore the balance in, because this technology, even when we started in like say Dying Race, like that there was very few people who had gear. Like even you have a basic recording setup. Like I mean, most people have that now. So
yeah,
it's a gift. It's an awesome thing. It gives everybody a chance. But it's also tough. I feel like it's also kind of blurred those boundaries of, hey, I've got to go to this spot to get this thing done, and I'm going to play this role, and they're going to play that role. And I feel like now the roles have just kind of gotten a little bit more skewed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if there was any advice to give to people trying to be creators, trying to do this sort of stuff, is look at what your strengths are and then try to sort of counterbalance it. So, we have these sparks of insight, true creativity, but sometimes that can be a little messy and unsort of formed. So then it takes people with a technical, skilled sort of knowledge to try to bring that into manifestation. Some line of a song or some visionary thing doesn't translate to bringing it into form. So we need technical people and structure-minded people. This is where you go from the intuition to the intellect. To really, truly create something beautiful, you need harmony between both. If it's all just intuition, it's just like, whatever.
Yeah, and a reference point too. Like if you come in here, you expect I'm going to know how to dial in a good guitar sound, not just fizz. It's the reason you don't say, hey man, that fizz sounds good. Like here, I throw in a boss metal zone, like straight into the box, and it sounds like paper. You're going to say, this is where we go, hey, I know what a good record sounds like. So we're all chaining off the thing that brought us into the room, or the multiple pieces of art that brought us there, and that's our benchmark. It's like, I know what a massive drum kit's supposed to sound like in this context. I know what so this person comes in and the ramp isn't very good. Well, okay, I've got to have one here because I've got to shoot something out of those speakers that is going to make them get inspired enough to play their part and actually hear themselves better than they've ever heard themselves before. So that then taps. It's a really nice thing when you can do that for an artist. Like they've been playing under really crappy sonic conditions, and you bring them in. You almost see them like go, oh wow, this is what I've been kind of going for. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy how sometimes it takes the studio, because the live thing's different. You're there's people, but usually when they're home and writing and stuff, like their listening experience of it all isn't that great. Might be a really loud, kind of nasty sound in jam space, or they don't record very well. So I get the pleasure of and the opportunity to see somebody just hear themselves clear in an inspiring way, and they go, holy shit, like I've never heard myself sound that way. They play better, and you see that kind of kid, that little kid pop out and go, fuck, this is when I was watching Much Music when I was like 50, this is what I was going for. So
yeah, I think if you find yourself saying, oh well, I'm the creative guy, or if you think about, oh well, I'm probably more the technical guy, I don't always have these crazy sparks of creativity, but I have this technical knowledge. Just try to find balance. If you find yourself on either side of that spectrum, if you're a purely just expressionist, artist, creative guy, well, try then to develop technical skills. Study, the structure
100%.
of songwriting,
Great advice.
Theory of music, understand the computer programs, and that kind of takes you more to a place of balance. Or if you're a highly intellectual, technical-minded individual, that's great, because those are great strengths to have. But if you're lacking in the intuitive, creative space, then maybe sit down and meditate for a while. Maybe go for a walk every day. Find quiet time. Try to express yourself in more intuitive ways, and then that will bring you back into balance. So,
and most people, I think nobody is without intuition. So the person we might look at as maybe completely techie. I don't look at myself that way, but I know there's some of you like straight engineer brain. I'm like getting the measuring tape out, from the mic to the source. But it's funny because that's where they might get boxed in that whatever environment they're in, and they know the role and they stay there. But I'm somebody who's good with like, I'll see another person. It's like, oh, they'll drop something like, oh, you know, you know what you're talking about. You know, that it's never, you know, this is another piece of advice. Never underestimate anybody in the room. Their ideas, if it's the camera guy, if it's like a janitor coming in with a mop saying something, I feel everybody's got, to an extent, you know, that sort of level of intuition. It's whether they might just have a poor view of themselves and they would never listen to it or they would never voice it. But
yeah, you have to come to trust your intuition and speak to it. And you know, the last record we did with Screaming Sins was a really good example of that. It's only a 3-piece band, right? And so there's just 3 kind of inputs, and then of course yourself too as a producer. But you know, once we recorded that and we were listening to it back, and I was pretty happy with it. And then, but each individual heard something in that. And I had to sort of take a step back and just say, and then it turned out to be exactly the right thing that needed to create balance. So you do, and that's the collaboration of it all.
It
right?
is.
It's not just about you. You have to honor and value the other perspectives. I found one really interesting thing about recording that Screaming Sins record together was that the piano part that we put in.
Yeah.
Remember that? So the song was Your Dark Desire, kind of an ominous sort of very moody type of a song. But we were all sitting in the control room here and listening to it back. And it's not like we went in the studio thinking, we should have a piano part on that one song. But all of us in the room seemed to actually start to hear
100%
a piano part in that song, which was really unusual.
Yeah.
And so we just immediately just said, well, it's got to be there then. And of course,
it was almost like we were already listening to it, which is that brings up a very interesting concept too, because I feel a good part of my actual trying to write music, I suffered from this particular thing where I was imagining things that weren't there. And then I would hear the recordings I would do, and I'm like, yeah, it sounds good, but I feel like there was more to this.
Yeah. And
I came to realize later that certain like harmonies and things were actually going on in my brain, and while we were jamming, but I didn't have the skills to articulate them out or to know that it wasn't there. I would just lay it down in the studio and be like, why the fuck isn't it there? You know, where's that melodic depth I felt like I was hearing? So very interesting how we kind of, and that happens a lot in the studio too. Like you'll hear a weird overtone and you're like, is this a part? And you go soloing through stuff. It's like, it's not a part. We need it. We need it to be a part. So yeah, then you pick up a guitar. But we were lucky because, you know, Michelle was here and she's a pianist. So she's like, exactly. I sent it up. I feel so fucking grateful because I'm like, I can literally send it upstairs and then it comes back the next day. Yeah. And, you know, it was like clink, 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 clink.
And it was perfect.
It
really added a dimension to that particular song.
Because that song to me was like, could have been like the opening to like True Blood or something. You know, the opening track that you hear before every episode. It just had that, you know, it has that kind of swagger kind of thing. Plus they have this, Screaming Sins have this like Halloween.
It's very much a horror theme.
I love
Psychobilly,
it. Yeah, Paul does Paul and Vanessa both do the look really well and stuff. So it's a really tight, you know, it's funny because you kind of told me about their history. They've been kind of sitting on these songs forever, and it just was like, kind of just felt like, oh, boom, there it is for them. They've
been a band a long time, and so when Paul kind of approached me about it, I just said, like, how many songs do you have that you've not recorded or anything? He started thinking about it. He said he had it somewhere up around 30 songs, and I just thought, man, there's like, to me that was just so much potential there that's untapped. So I get really excited about potential, you know.
Yeah.
And anyway,
how have the first gigs gone? By the way, with that, like you guys did a few gigs in the
we've only played a couple times.
Yeah,
so
and how was that?
It was great. I mean, but our focus going into the band, like I was actually coming out of the Beta 58s, and they wanted to do some significant traveling. They were going to, be flying out west and doing a string of shows on the west coast of Canada, all that sort of stuff. And unfortunately, I just have a lot kind of going on. I can't put life on hold. And unfortunately, we live in a time touring's not particularly profitable, unfortunately. And
you need gas in the tank.
Yeah, it was a really tough decision, but anyway, that kind of corresponded with the next opening, which was this pitch with the Screaming Sins, and so I just told Paul, I'm the thing that I love most about music is the creational process. So writing, recording, music videos, visual media sort of stuff. This is all the stuff that really I love. And so I just straight up told him, I said, if you want to focus on that stuff, like I'm your guy, but I don't know if I can be out running the roads like I used to. It seems like in modern music, it's kind of a reverse approach. So at one time, to be seen or discovered or heard, you had to be out running the roads, playing the bars and doing all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And then you would hope that enough people would be at the show, they'd start to engage, buy your record, buy your merch, that sort of stuff. It's almost in a upside down role now with all the social media and technology and all this sort of stuff. It's the reverse. So you actually build a fan base more from good quality output, social
TikTok
media,
videos,
Spotify,
all that stuff, yeah.
All these sorts of stuff. So you build the following first, and then if there's enough demand for it, then you go out and showcase it.
And they also say like bands have sort of become merchandise sort of salesmen in the way that's where they're getting a lot of their tour money from, and not so albums have gone down the shitter. Because Spotify is paying like fraction of a cent on the dollar.
But you can sell a $30 shirt on Spotify.
Yeah.
Now you can link up your merch.
Yeah, and at the table
Spotify.
Too. Yeah.
So you just got to think a lot bigger, especially for us when we're in a fairly obscure genre. I mean, is there a psychobilly scene in Kingston, Ontario? A little bit, and probably I know every single one of them.
Yeah.
But that's where you got to broaden the approach and think more on a worldwide scale. Think about the platforms,
and that's a great band to have that
utilize them.
Yeah, and that's a great band to have that kind of content.
I think there's a huge advantage now to being in a niche genre. It's proven in my experiments with trying to keep up with these platforms and everything like that. It helps to be in a very specific genre. For instance, if you're in a rock band or a punk band, it's kind of meaningless at this point because it's so open-ended, widespread.
So many subgenres, and yeah.
Whereas if I say we're a psychobilly band, either A, you don't know what I'm talking about, you've never heard of the genre, or you're really into it because you know exactly what it is. And people want to feel that. It was like when we were young coming up, you want the special, to feel like you're a part of something small and unique and special. It's still kind of like that.
Well, and I did the last episode I did with Coster. That was called The Price of Admission because we had a good sort of venting about it's like TikTok first and then the song second, because that's what's happening. There's it's like you need, like they were telling him, you need 5 to 6 well done TikTok skits per day. And it's like you spend your day.
That's insane.
It's insane. It's fucking insanity. So you're sitting with your phone instead of making the music. That you got to make that too, but you've also got to do 6 videos, edit them, make them funny, try to make them viral. I also saw this clip on Instagram of one of these big songwriters. I can't remember One Republic, if you're familiar with that group. Couple massive hits. This Ryan Tedder, I think is his name. I might have pronounced it wrong. Anyways, he's basically saying you got to write 5 times more hits to make a hit. You also got to make TikTok hit at the same time. So this entire thing has changed. So I think this is interesting because I think people need to get back to the core of why they're creating. Like, what are you doing it for? If you're chasing that, if you're chasing the top of the pedestal, like, get ready to, get your phone skills out, get your editing chops out. But I also think, and then when bands want to come make an album, I really try to say, take this as an experience, and I try to do a good experience when I do. I don't just record bands anymore, but when I do, it's like, let's make this an experience. You're going to walk away, and when you've quit this and you've been far removed from doing any music, or at least with this group of people, which happens in a very finite amount of time, let's make it a good experience. Because if it's for the marketability and if it's for all that, like, it's that's gonna that I feel like people that are meant for that, it just happens. You can't force that. And and maybe that's a generational thing too. Like, you grow up with a phone in your hand, maybe that's easier for some of these creators now to be constantly churning out these videos. For me, I'm a craft person. I'm going to do the craft. I'm going to put up the odd video. I want to send out some stuff that people can learn from, but that's as far as I'm going with that stuff, straight up, man.
Yeah, I guess every musician or creative has to ask themselves where that boundary is, but to me it always comes back to, am I putting the fullest intention into whatever I'm doing? I don't care. I care about quality more than quantity. I'm not just going to be pumping out whatever TikTok or Instagram reels just to do them. The quality comes first, and I'd rather not post anything for a month and, then post a bunch of stuff that's not my fullest, best work. So
yeah.
To me, it's just quality over quantity for me personally.
And it's funny because that, by the standards of the latest social media, influencer, you're dead. Like by posting stuff at that frequency, the fact I don't even have it. I have a TikTok account. I don't think I've actually signed into the app, and it's like, you're dead. Like to that world, you haven't started or you're fucking dead. It's crazy. How much you have to be on there and engaging to even have a chance. So I know one band, they totally did what you said, the reverse. They backed out of touring. They were touring. I had a lot of respect for these guys. I won't name them, but they were going out and doing it the old-fashioned way. They had good songs, and I'm not saying they should have made it because there's no guarantees in this business, but they were out there renting the van, doing the thing, and then they eventually just said, we can't do that anymore. We're losing too much money. And then they started trying to make TikTok videos, and you could tell that, it just wasn't. Some people that's not what they're put here to do.
Yeah, I guess bands on a bigger scale would be hiring teams of people to do that sort of stuff for them, their social media, so then they can focus on their art, and that would be a nice place to get to. But again, for me, I'm pretty relaxed about my creations these days.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make, Screaming Sins or anything else that I'm doing the next big TikTok thing or whatever. I don't care about that. I just care about that I'm fulfilling my creative potential and trying to make the best thing that I can create.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I think I also agree. I kind of get caught up, when I work in film and television. That's a world that it's very competitive, and it's very, a lot of people are, trying to climb the ladder at the same time. And the reason you're trying to climb it, though, is because you want to get to the better movie, because the better movie is you can score a better movie better. And so that what you just said makes me think too, I have to hit a certain point of, it's great to help people that are under your experience level. It's awesome when you're matched. It's hard and shitty, but also probably the best thing for me when you're punching under your weight and you're trying to, whatever it is your motivation is for that, whether it's trying to get to be the biggest in your industry or whatever that is, there is a great feeling of stretching and trying to come up to the next thing rather than it being, because sometimes it's like this comfort versus doing something hard thing, like working out or just sitting on the couch and grabbing a snack. Like, so I feel in the age of comforts are available in full supply. Now I've got to really recognize, like, when I'm sitting on the desk and I'm like, I fucking hate this project. I'm probably in a project that's doing me good. That's like pushing me to, it means I'm pushing into something else.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find yourself ever in that position, or do you find yourself pretty like, or you're like, I'm really wrenching on this, or do you even want to be in that spot, like where you're like, like lifting weights, you're trying to make gains or whatever, do you find that that's what you're moving for creatively, or do you just let it naturally flow in and out of your life?
Well, I guess I have made a firm commitment to be a creative individual, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm creating a haircut or creating a garden or creating music. I just want to be a force on the planet that gives to it and doesn't take. I'm always trying to develop in some capacity. Historically, with my musical timeline, it seems to each sort of project and group that I play with seems to have always had a bit of a peak, and when it started to fizzle out, I would always notice that, the energy of just stopped sort of being there. So I would just either go to where the next creative energy was pulling me, or actually diversify and develop skills in other ways. So that's kind of been my process. Like at some point I felt that I kind of peaked out on my skills on the drums. It was like, I was playing as fast and as technical as I could. Yeah. I could have pushed through that boundary for sure. But my journey started to diversify. I started to play more bass, started to play more guitars, started to learn how to sing, and that's really captivated my attention in recent years. And then genres too, like, I've been through punk, I've been through metal, and I, explored, traditional country music, folk music, all this sort of stuff. So I tend to kind of either diversify or just feel drawn to the next thing.
Rather than, okay, I'm going to go to this like super, super deep level on the drums. You're more compelled to, there's this whole other world I'm going to sort of jump into.
To me, that's just been my journey. And I always, I think of a band like the Mahones always comes to mind. Like those guys, 30 years have been playing Irish punk music.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, that's amazing that they have that longevity and have always kind of continued to do that one thing. And you can get a lot of success kind of continuously, never endingly, do your thing. And I love that. And, but for me, it's just been, it's my journey's been more of a kind of a
diversified approach,
a Renaissance type approach. The Da Vinci. He was an artist, but also a mathematician, and all these other qualities, and to try to become a well-rounded, human being, essentially. So.
Well, I can really relate to that. As much as I love heavy music, and I probably could, we don't really reside in that area where there's like tons of pics of like rock and metal bands, because I'd probably exclusively, like, if I had my way, I'd probably like stay in that genre. However, that's not been my path either. I've then been like, hey, I've made a folk record. I've made some country. I've made not kind of the old country, more of the newer stuff, but I've made punk, I've made metal, I've made pop. So I can really relate to what you're saying, because it was kind of like, let's try this pair of clothes, this pair of clothes on, and let's see if it. And it's funny, like, in my head, I'm like, oh, maybe this is the pair that will stay on, but the pair of clothes that stay on for me is creating, and I have to, because sometimes I feel like I'm too spread out all over the place, and the world wants you to be this one great thing.
They do.
And I struggle with that. And so this has been, as I kind of spoke about this untangling that I've kind of been doing in the last few weeks, like part of it was like, hey man, this has been your experience. These are the things that have naturally come into your life. Like one minute you're recording an album, the next minute you're producing, the next minute you're working on a film. You're not, where I look at Michelle and she's just a film composer. That's what she does every fucking day. And there's an envy to it. But if I was honest with myself, that's not what my path puts before me.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll wrap up soon, but I want to talk just a little bit about like a craft I really think is really cool that you do, like the barbering. Like where did that kind of start? I mean, you do so many things, man. I'm pretty impressed. You even named a few I didn't have in my my little paragraph here, but with the barbering, because I get to experience that from a customer level. It's one of the most relaxing things for me to go. You have like such a calming energy. Just a quick little thing. I saw that video of you with the dog the other day, and you're just like, I think Dallas posted, and the dog's just like jumping around, but you never go past this certain level of elation. You're just kind of, so when I go into your barbershop, it's really chill. You got a really nice spot, and there's a craft to it. I see all the different sizes of like trimmers and buzzers, and even the old school powders and different things that from the more like 50s style barbershops. Like, you want to talk a little bit about barbering just a bit?
Well, it brings me back to this phrase, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And it was actually Dallas that proposed the idea to me. And she would always go to the barber because she always had a short, well-kept haircut, and she preferred to go to a barber rather than a stylist. So it was just a big part of her life. And at some point she just suggested to me, because I was kind of in between. I was coming out of a job as a chef, and I was just playing strictly music and trying to make a life and a living just from music, and that was a worthy experiment. But I felt at a certain point, okay, I need to do something. You have to do something. That's the bottom line to be in this place.
Yeah.
You have to make money, and you have to,
They don't allow you to just sit in the woods.
Yeah, exactly. So I had to do something, and she suggested barbering, and I guess she just saw the qualities in me that she felt that would make a good barber.
So you hadn't even barbered up until this point? She just kind of said maybe this, or had you experimented with it at this point?
No. But I had noticed that there was a resurgence in traditional men's barbering. At the time, we were doing a lot of traveling, and we were going to, New York City and California, and I noticed these interesting barbershops and things that were coming up that just had this kind of vibe to them that I really liked. And to me, it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't my childhood dream to become a barber, but it had a lot of qualities that I could see that might create a good life that were compatible with me. There's of course a creative element to it. I wouldn't say it's a pure act of creation. I think of barbering as a craft. I'm not just creating art on somebody's head. I'm contracted by them to fulfill a service. So I think of it more as maybe a woodworker or something, somebody trying to chip away at this craft over time and improve your skills all the time. But it just has a lot of benefits to it, in my opinion. I can listen to whatever music I want. I can see and have very intimate social interactions with people, kind of one-on-one, and I like that. I'm not actually a big, crowds guy. I'm not a big extroverted guy. I'm pretty, I don't know. I like the straight one-on-one connection, and I do love the human connection. My barber chair is a place where people can speak freely. We can talk about anything under the sun. anything goes. There's a certain freedom. I can call my own shots. I can make my own hours. It just has a lot of qualities that I really like at it, and it's something I obsessively focus on and just trying to develop that much more. It's a little bit like music. There's no end to music, right? You don't get to a point where you're, okay, I've learned music now. It's a never-ending process, and you're always trying to chip away at it. Barbering kind of has that same quality to it.
Yeah, it's funny when you're sitting in the barber's chair, there's, when the things are kind of running up and down your neck and stuff, like there's such a relaxing quality to it, and it's something about somebody else doing that to you. Like if you did it to yourself, it doesn't have the same effect.
I'm always surprised at how many people actually fall asleep in the barber chair.
That's what I'm saying. Like you're like,
as soon as you hear those buzzers go, and it's like that white noise, and 3:00 on a Friday, everybody's nodding off.
I almost want to just like pay you for like 3 hours and just keep running the thing across my neck, dude. Like, yeah. No, it's a really cool craft. I love how you blended that with the photography that you kind of dipped into, because then you got taking pictures of some of your clients. And
I started out just taking pictures of my haircuts just to document my own journey and a little bit of social media stuff. And I had always dabbled in photography, but never actually. I always kind of did, landscapes, and I never actually wanted to have the human interaction as much. It was kind of intimidating, but I started just taking pictures of haircuts and thinking about lighting and composition and all this sort of stuff. And then what I realized I was actually doing was portrait photography. And then when I came to finally accept that that's what I was doing, wasn't just taking pictures of hair, it was trying to capture some essence or emotion or life force in these subjects. I became very interested in it, and it's just been something that I've slowly kind of dabbled in and that I enjoy.
Yeah, well, so to cap the episode off, is there anything else you want to, anything you want to talk about you got coming up, or, is there anything we didn't touch on that maybe you want to touch on before we wrap things up here?
If you want to follow me, what I do, you can check out my Instagram. It's probably where I kind of express the most, maybe. Landon Dane Martin on Instagram. And if you're interested in my work in country music, and that's a whole nother dimension that we didn't touch on too much, mostly I do my traditional country music things on Facebook. You could follow me there, Landon Martin. You can drop into the barbershop if you want to come see me, and reach out anytime.
Your barbershop, for anyone who doesn't know, is just on the outskirts of Napanee.
It's a private studio, so just contact me and I'll
through the app. The Cut is a good place to
The Cut is the app that I use, called The Cut. And musically I'm working with the Screaming Sins. It's a psychobilly kind of horror punk project. Check them out, pretty active there. And I guess
great. Well, thanks for the chat, and I'm stoked to let people dig into it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.